Okay. Hey, sis. Today we're talking about the kind of courage you don't see. It's the kind of courage you feel in your chest before you make a decision that could change everything. Well, today I'm joined by my writing coach, Miss Rebekah Pierce. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Great. I'm happy to hear that. Now, my courage seekers are going to want to hear your answer to this question.
Oh,
What
wow.
decision what decision in your life felt the most risky at the time that you made it?
Well, when you sent me the question to consider, I've had several very life-changing experiences in my life. And when I sat down to reflect on which one I should talk about, I actually let Spirit guide me into deciding which one was the one that I think speaks most prominently to where I'm at right now in my life.
Mhm.
And that would be the decision that I made to stop being what I call a ghostbuster. Um, I had spent most of my entire life, from probably the moment I can remember, but definitely from 12 to 45, doing what I call chasing ghosts. And that is, words are my life. I'm a writer, I'm a reader. I take language so very seriously. And there, have spoken about it a couple times, two moments in my life at 12 and 16 when my father told me I wasn't going to be anybody. I wasn't going to be anything. And that to hear that from your own father, it set up a lifetime of me trying to prove people wrong about what they said about me. So if you called me a liar, I got really offensive, really defensive, excuse me. If you said anything that I felt was attacking who I felt I was, I would come at you. And it was full charge, full speed ahead for me. So when I ended my marriage in 2017, after realizing that I was with someone who did not truly loved me, who was more wounded than I ever imagined, and when I looked at the reason why I was with this person, it was because I was trying to prove who I was. Well, long story short, when I left, he took me through the ringer. I went through a court battle, custody court battle that nearly left me completely broken. And in the last time we were there in 2024, uh, God brought me to my knees with the decision that was made based on what someone had said about me that was not true. And what God said to me was, whose report will you believe? Their, theirs, or mine? And I had to decide literally within 24 hours of returning to court for a what had already been a crushing defeat. This, already been a crushing defeat. You already had my daughter. You've taken all the money I had, and here one last time he's going to put the nail in the coffin. And so that night, God really spoke to me about, you're here because you keep trying to defend what someone else is saying about you when you know that it's not true. If I don't believe it, and your children don't believe it, and your family doesn't believe it, why are you so pressed to change what someone else is saying about you? So, in that moment, before heading into court, I let all those years of chasing down people's words about me, I had to let that go. It was my Achilles heel, always on the defense. I am somebody, trying to prove it. When all along I was already somebody. I didn't need to prove anything. So,
So let's stay in that moment,
mm-hmm,
because what I'm hearing you say, the thing that you were most passionate about, words,
mm-hmm,
was the weapon, had become the weapon that someone was
used
using
against me.
against you.
Yes.
So, how did you feel? Without going into too much detail, but how did it make you feel in that moment when those words that were weaponized
Oh,
against you?
I, and I rarely talk. This part of my story I rarely talk about because it's the most painful, because
Mm,
I equate it with in 2020 when the judge stripped me of my physical custody of my daughter because of a lie that my lawyer and I could not defend. It was totally misconstrued because they were willing to believe this about me. I remember the scream in the parking lot.
Mm.
I equate it to being the mother on the slave auction block and them taking my baby from me
Wow.
because I knew we knew what this man had put me through, had put us through, and I was going to have to go home and tell my then 10-year-old daughter that she was going to have to go live with the boogeyman, and I couldn't do anything about it. For the first time in my life, my words, my own truth, was used against me in such a cruel way
Mm.
that all I remember from that day was the scream.
I know you're using the word scream, but in my heart, in my soul, I'm imagining more of a wailing.
It was a
Uh,
wail. It was a wail from a universe that I had only ever read about. It was unlike anything I'd ever experienced in my life. And so when we look at that, when I look at how they knew how to get me, this clearly this person had studied me well because words are my love language. And it was
yes.
all I ever wanted from people was this affirmation, this confirmation of who I knew I was, but I wanted other people to say it through words, and I never got that. And so every time I would be forced to turn to court to this phenomenal lesson that God was putting me through, that He was giving me, I call it my Jonah and the whale moment.
Mm.
because part of me knew that this is what the attack was, but I didn't know how to let it go. I didn't know how to surrender. I didn't know how to give up my job as that Ghostbuster. And so every time we would return to court in those 4 or 5 years, I was always trying to defend my words. And every time I would do that, they would slice me. And I would come back home with more cuts and bruises than when I had left the house because they knew how to harm me. It was through my words.
Dear
The thing that
Lord.
I'd built an entire career on.
Right.
Words. So yes, letting that moment in July of 2024, excuse me, yes, 2024, was the life-changing, really truly the moment when I surrendered and I let it go. And the result really was victory coming out of that courtroom because what they had intended to do, what they had done to me and my family for 4 years, God ended it that day. And we'll talk about that in the next part of the question that you have for me. I'll tell you how God ended it.
Because my next question is, and I'm kind of jumping around because we're kind of
No,
jumping
you're fine.
around.
You're fine.
But well, first of all, thank you
You're
for
welcome.
sharing that very, I don't know, life-changing
Hmm.
moment, not just for you, but for your child as well.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing that with us. Now, but I'm a mother. I'm a mother too. So,
Mhm.
what helped you move forward in that fight? It didn't happen in a day, so I know it took time. What helped you move forward?
I had to, when God had that conversation with me, He also sent me a dream.
Mm.
Ooh, in that dream, I could even describe to you that I'll just say the dream was surreal. It was unlike anything I've ever experienced. And when I went into the court the next day, I went in with this calmness, this assuredness that I rarely have felt in my life. And I remember my son had decided to come with me. And that was a
Mm.
big step for him because he's not a confrontational person. And
Okay.
for him to feel like he needed to support me, finally, it felt like the last hoorah. And it was actually.
Mm.
And so when I went into court that day, they wouldn't let my son come in the courtroom with me
Mm.
at the request of the opposing party. And I
Oh.
and I knew, and I just remember smiling because I had been humming this song, God is in the room. And I was just humming it as we were waiting out there in the lobby. And then when we went into the courtroom, after they said my son could not come in, I remember sitting there and just I'm humming that. There is God in the room. Mhm. God is in the room. And I must have been humming it so loud that the judge told my lawyer to tell me to stop. And my lawyer reaches over, he goes, Rebecca, I'm gonna need you to stop humming. I said, what? He said, stop humming. I said, oh, okay. And I'm just calm. And I just hum it in my head. And when the judge says I'll be back with my decision, and I went to the restroom, I just remember in that restroom just crying and just singing, God is in the room. And then the other song that God gave me was I Don't Mind Waiting. I don't mind waiting. I don't mind waiting. And I remember my hand is holding the door to open it to go back out there. And I'm just that song has just dropped in my spirit. And I'm not a singer. But I'm
Mhm.
singing it. And when I walk out and I go in the courtroom, I'm just smiling and the judge comes back and he says, she's not paying anything. This decision is settled. There's nothing. And walked out of there with a victory after 4 years, 4.5, 5 years, because really this all started in 2017. I walked out of there, even though the judge did one last thing. The devil, he's always working, he did one last thing. He put on the official paperwork. Once again, mother is intentionally chooses to be uh unemployed. Now, I'm employed. But it was attack, it was another attack with words
Yes.
written on the paper. And I remember looking at that paper and just smiling. And when we got up to leave, I said, thank you, and walked out that courtroom. And this time there was no wailing in the parking lot. This time it was victory for me because since 2024, there's been nothing. You can't touch me. You didn't make me, so you cannot break me. And in that moment, is where I began to do the work of the lemonade mindset. I had to shift my mind. I had to shift my mind. And I remember this quote from Kirk Franklin, where he says, "Who am I? Well, because I've only known me broken." And on that day, I found out who I was, and it wasn't what anyone else says about me. It's what I had known and believed to be true between me and my creator. Yeah, that was a moment.
Well, that you answered my next question was what did you learn from the experience?
That God, the first few times I went in there begging God. And I remember when I lost my bid to get physical custody. We have joint custody of my daughter. But when I lost the bid for physical custody, and after the judge he ripped me to pieces. He wouldn't hear my witnesses. He really, I mean, they did a number on me. And I remember crying, coming out of that courtroom saying, God wasn't there. God left me. How could he not? How could he not be there? All my life, God has been there. How could God not be there? How could I not get her back? And this time, I what I learned was God is always there. God is always in the room. You have to remove your human eyes and put on what I call your faith-filled eyes, spirit, and remember that in stepping into the room, God is always there. You got to let the ego go, and you got to look for God in the room. And that's why those two songs came to me. I don't mind waiting because God is always in the room. It's you've got to take your ego out of it. And when I did that, when I took out the begging and I just said, I'm going to look for God in this courtroom because I know my God is here.
Yes.
And that's what I focused on. And it's so funny. There's a quote I'm reading for my doctoral program. We're reading Reverend Marion Edgar Budd's book, How to Learn to Be Brave. And she has a quote in there that Dr. King gave when they asked him about if he could move or live in any other time period except for this moment, what would he do? And he said he chose to stay in this moment. And the quote that he gave was, "But I know somehow that only when it is dark enough can you see the stars." And in my darkest moment, I looked for the stars. I looked for God in the room. And that is where many of us, we fight so hard against what is happening when God says, I need you to surrender. I need you to trust me. And that is what faith is. It is really literally saying, I know I have no control over any of this. The only thing I can control is me and how I respond in this moment. So instead of panicking, instead of begging, instead of demanding justice, I'm going to look for God in the
God take the wheel.
room. Absolutely. I'm the passenger. Let me just ride with you.
Yes,
Right?
that's faith.
Yes. It's hard. We want so much for things to turn out the way we want them, but we don't have control over external things. We don't
Right.
have control over this shell and
That's
the
it.
machine that runs it. And so, people would say, "Well, why didn't how it couldn't have been that easy?" Well, you know what? It took me that ride in the belly of the whale to finally get to the moment where I said, "Well, you know what? Nothing else has worked.
Mm.
I really can't do nothing about none of this, and I have to let this go. As much as I don't want to, I have to let this go."
Wow. So, what would you say to the woman facing the same decision?
She's gonna have to let it go. And I know it hurts. Oh
Yeah.
my God, does it hurt? But there's a greater victory on the way. And in order for you to see what the other side of the mountain looks like, in order for you to see, to take in the fresh air outside of the belly of the whale, you're going to have to let it go because what we can imagine for our lives is nothing compared to what God can do for our lives.
Yeah.
And although would I love to have my daughter with me every day, physically every day, I would. But I do have my daughter with me every day. We text every morning. Every decision she makes, every opportunity she experiences, every chance she gets to show up, I am there because I was not removed from her life. In fact, I'm a much stronger presence in her life than what they were hoping for. My influence is everywhere. My love is everywhere. You don't have the power to break that. And
Right.
so our relationship is probably more strong and intense than it would have been if I had been able to fully have my hands on her upbringing.
Mhm.
Oh, what you meant to destroy me, God only made it stronger. But I had to get out of my own way. And so I've had this conversation with women who are in this experience. You don't have to let it go. There's nothing you can do but to just show up every day for your children in whatever way God allows it to be. If it's
Mhm.
through a text message, if it's through a phone call, if it's through a FaceTime, you show up every time. Every event they have, if it's not court ordered that you can't be there, show up.
Mhm.
Demand to be present. Show up. Let them know I was not ever going to give up on you because my God never gives up on me. So you
Because God
show
is in the
up.
room.
God is always in the room. And you have
Mhm.
to keep that faith no matter what it looks like. No matter what it looks like, God has not left you. God is there. You just must open up your eyes and look.
So, would that message also be the same thing that you would whisper in the ear of Rebecca when she first started that journey?
Yes, because boy, again, in that parking lot, I thought I would die. I did not know how I was going to make it through. I did not know
Mm.
how. I don't even remember the drive home through tears. I mean, I think I called my mom, and the scream was just so loud she couldn't understand anything that I was saying. And I
Mm.
just did not know how I was going to tell my children what had happened. And the first night was the hardest. I just didn't even know how to breathe anymore. And but the only thing that I knew that I did have was God, because all I kept saying, there's God has got to get me, he's got to get us through this. There ain't no other way I'm going to make it through this. I just don't even know how I'm going to make it through this. I don't know how I'm going to make it through this because I was the one that was wounded. I was the one that was nearly killed. I was the one coming in with the good record and everything. How could this be? How could this be? And I just kept saying there was got to be something in this thing that I have to learn, something that I must be needing to show my children, show myself, because how could this be?
Right. Yes.
That was a long journey.
And I want to thank you so much for taking the time out to share this
You're welcome.
very personal part of your journey with us. And I won't forget that you said you had several stories that you could tell. So that means we can invite you back for another courage conversation.
Yes, absolutely. And just
No,
remember the repeat after me sis comes from the lemonade mindset. It's an extension of the mindset. So when you see my repeat after me sis affirmations that I put on all my social media, that's where that comes from. It comes from quitting and resigning my job as a ghostbuster.
thank you.
Welcome.
Now, let me just close our time together by saying what you have shared today. It took real courage.
Thank
It
you.
took real courage to understand that something that you cherished was being used against you, and not to take it out on the thing that you cherished, words,
Right.
but be patient and be still and know that God is always there.
Always.
Now, and for the women watching this, or for the woman watching this, I'm speaking to someone in particular.
Hmm.
For the woman watching this, especially this message today, who feels stuck, who's questioning whether she can make the next move to overcome something similar to what Rebecca had to overcome. Let your fear fuel your courage. And if you need support taking that next step, the link is below. And I want to thank you, Rebecca, for being here, and thank everyone for watching.